Is Putin rational? This question came up and keeps coming up. So for my short rant today, I want to look at this question and also just, what does rational even mean? So, okay, rationality. I sometimes like to call it the R word because it gets in the way. And in academia, I was a rational choice scholar. I did a lot of game theory and that sort of thing. And people always objected to the concept of people being rational because there were so many examples, seemingly, of people being irrational. However, rationality has a particular meaning, especially in academia. And I think when Biden was talking about it, and by the way, it also came up in a CNN interview today about, is Putin rational? And it's certainly a central question when we talk about nuclear threats and what's Putin going to do, right? So the question of rationality in this context is not whether someone is clear thinking, deliberate, unemotional. It's about whether they're purposive or goal seeking. Are they engaging in action based on the outcomes, right? Are they calculating the consequences of what they're doing and picking alternatives based on a more, from their point of view, desired outcome? So one thing I like to say about rationality, we have to be very careful. Rational action in this point of view, from this, is not perfect, right? A rational person can be wrong. They can have bad information. They can have bad beliefs. They can be just, well, they can be wrong, right? So very often people will say, oh, well, this didn't work out for him, so it wasn't rational, right? Did you go through and did you, find out the right intelligence and all that stuff? And if you didn't, you weren't rational. There's a thing called procedural rationality where you go through the deliberate steps and you get everything right, right? Instrumental rationality says, well, no, we understand that people can be wrong. They can have incomplete information as long as they're, seeking to make a choice with the best information they have available at that time under, decisions under uncertainty can be rational if they're aimed at making, getting to a certain goal. So this is what we're talking about. And if you want to understand the difference between rational and irrational, the idea of an irrational action is an action that is not aimed towards a particular goal. And in terms of, imagine you're driving, right? If I go to CVS, my goal is to get to CVS. I'm going from my home to CVS, and the goal of getting to CVS presumably affects my behavior, where the path I take. Imagine though I'm out for a drive, right? And we used to talk, there's a term, old term now, Sunday drivers, right? People that would drive around slowly and all. The point of them is, if you're out for a drive just for the joy of driving, right? And the idea here is that the action has an intrinsic value to you. Well, you're less predictable. Where at any given stop sign, which direction am I going to go, right? Any given intersection, for that matter, right? Being purposive means, we can predict your behavior better, and it's aimed at achieving some objective. And we say, look, did I pick the right way to go to CVS? Well, if you understand where I'm trying to go, you can make a judgment on that. If I'm out for a ride, unpredictable. So that's the difference there. Now, rationality, though, I think has three components we want to take a close look at, right? So the first one is the goals, right? Am I trying to go to CVS, or am I just out to enjoy myself? What are a person's goals? And when people say, look at Putin, or they look at anybody, right? We frequently, that world leader is irrational. A lot of times we don't understand the goals. We don't understand what they're trying to achieve, right? And the question of goals comes up a lot, right? Realists in international relations will talk about a national interest, and they'll say, look, a nation has certain core interests, and therefore a leader of a nation will have to pursue them, and therefore they have this objective, meaning that anyone who looks at the situation of that nation can recognize and say, these are the correct goals or interests, vital interests, right? It's another term that comes up that anyone can see, right? And so we can, in that sense, we don't talk about Putin's goals, we talk about Russia's goals or needs or interests or security concerns, whatever you want to call it, right? That's one way. Another way is to say, well, Putin may have a goal. He may have a vision of greater Russia, or something along. He may have a goal with that respect. Bring a more personal component in. Also, I think a very important part of this, Putin's goals may be entirely political at home, domestic politics, right? May be having more of an impact on him. And so his goals, if they're domestic, and and I think increasingly this is the case, that he is now in a position where he has to keep his political fight for his political survival. So those goals change. Now, in models of rational choice, we don't like to have goals change. Right? A person has a set of goals, preferences, interests, whatever at the beginning, and they go through whatever we model and they don't change. However, in real life, goals may change, right? And that may produce different behavior. So that's the first thing. What are the goals? The second thing is, what are the attitudes towards risk? Individuals have to when you're making decisions under uncertainty, which a national leader is definitely doing, especially when talking about a war, what is your attitude towards risk? Are you willing to risk big losses for big gains, or are you more conservative? If you've ever done investing, you've probably with a professional advisor of some kind, they will usually ask you questions to determine where your risk sensitivity is, right? Are you willing to go in the stock market and pursue big gains, but at any given point have half your portfolio wiped out? Or are you willing to seek smaller gains with greater security, right? Like pursuing T-bills or something. In the general world situation, that's an important thing, right? And so we tend to think of a decision maker's attitude towards risk as being a personal quality, right? What is this that they bring to the table as a leader? It also could, and technically that's what it means. However, it could be that certain political systems have greater penalties, right? Have greater consequences than other ones. And certainly when we look at democratic nations versus authoritarian nations, leaders of democratic nations tend to get thrown under the bus if they fail, right? There's what's called the disloyalty norm. Their supporters, if they don't achieve the objectives that they go to, especially with war, win the war, win it well, win it at a low cost. If a democratic leader doesn't do that, they're more likely to get kicked out. An authoritarian leader can go to war, and their support is based more on the private benefits they give that small group of key supporters. And this is all selectorate theory, Bueno de Mesquita, Smith, Siverson, and Morrow. But their idea is that a selectorate theory is that the leader in an authoritarian regime has a smaller coalition of supporters and provides private benefits to them. And as long as the private benefits keep flowing, they don't care, right? Do what you want internationally. And so those leaders have been able to survive failures, stay in office even though they lose. So differing penalties can explain, it's not exactly an attitude towards risk. It's just there's less risk, right? And that can be something that makes someone else's decisions, another leader's decisions, look kind of wonky to us. Then there are factual beliefs, right? Now, beliefs here are very important, but they're not beliefs about God, about what is right. What we're talking about is beliefs about the world, right? And I think there's two kinds here that are important. One is kind of informational, the way the world is. And, are you getting information, right? Do you know whether Saddam Hussein is actually making weapons of mass destruction, right? And has he been doing this? Has he been cheating on the Accords? That question was central to the decision to invade Iraq. And different perceptions of, that may have, and you could be wrong, by the way. A rational person could be wrong. You go and you find, there weren't. Okay, he wasn't cheating, damn it. That is one thing, right? And we hear this a lot. Does he know what's happening?
right? Is he getting advice? What are his advisors filtering information to him, right? We often hear about that. And so that is something that can go in the mix. But another belief I think is very important to consider is cause and effect beliefs, beliefs about the way the world works. And people can have different beliefs based on their experiences, their understanding of the world, also the scope of activity, and also their goals, right? Some goals, if Putin is pursuing domestic political goals, then the consequences of his actions that he's interested in are domestic as opposed to international. But the key thing about these cause and effect beliefs is they go to this question about predicting the future. If I do this, what will happen? And if you have differing beliefs about the way the world works and what the consequences are of particular actions, then you're going to obviously act in a different way. And you're going to appear irrational to people who have different beliefs or are looking at, the intended effects, or they're projecting, they're saying, okay, the intended effect of this action is in this realm vis-a-vis this goal, when in fact it's another realm vis-a-vis another goal, right? So that can create differences. And I know that Ben Browder in his book about Russia talked about dealing with oligarchs, and he said they have this prison yard mentality, right? And they have this idea that if they show any kind of weaknesses, if they allow anyone to challenge them without crushing them, they're going to be overthrown. And that is a different perception of the way the world works. And he said, this was weird, right? In any other country, this wouldn't have happened. But he said in Russia, he felt that was a big part of how the way these guys think. So it suggests that culture, in a cross-cultural situation, we might have a different set of beliefs about the way the world works that make someone appear to be irrational. So when we look at Putin, what are his goals? Is he, what do we understand about his goals? Are they strictly geostrategic? We can look at them objectively, or are they more idiosyncratic to him? Or is he now just entirely going for political goals? What's his attitude towards risk? Prospect theory suggests that when you get in a loss reference situation, when you're trying to avoid losses, you're likely to take more risks, right? So he may be now accepting more risk. And what are his factual beliefs, especially about cause and effect? These are things we need to consider and, to understand and be able to predict what he's going to do. Thank you for watching my short rant. I hope it was short and not too much of a rant. I'm Dr. Dave Hayes, and though I teach at Troy University, this video is my own work. Troy University has neither approved nor reviewed the content. So there. And if you want to learn more about Troy anyway, figure out who would hire a guy like this, you can always go to www.troy.edu. I also am going to have a little card popping up here that you can go see my bio and some information about where I teach, which will descend to shameless self-promotion, but I want more students. What can I say? And finally, the music you've been listening to is Tonight at 8 by Shane Ivers. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back and enjoy another short rant.